Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right. So we had a few technical difficulties this morning. We love technology when it works, and we really hate it when it doesn't. But Brian luckily has more than one computer at his disposal and has fixed the problem for now. So
There we go.
All right, so we got there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to start actually just to try to get your feelings about these mass shootings that occurred over the weekend. We had this shoot in California, tragic events, obviously, but predictably, and I don't want to make this overly political at the same time, but predictably, the Democrats are now calling, as they have done the past, for more gun control. So anyway.
So, a few things. First of all, the guy said that he chose Buffalo because no one could have a magazine large enough to actually fight back. And he had written letters to editors and so forth, calling for gun control. And part of what he's doing here is sort of spanking them for gun control, right? He's like, what you're doing doesn't work, and and now so. That's part of it. He talked about, and I think the country is going to have to sit down and have a very serious talk about this because, our friends on the left try to make this, he's right wing. He hated Jews, which is a lot more of a left wing thing now than it is a right wing thing. Far more the left wing thing than a right wing thing. Hated Fox News, hated Rupert Murdoch, hated Tucker Carlson, but this is blamed on conservatives, right? Because he shot black people. Well, that doesn't really square with the fact. And what he says in his treatise that people have been reviewing, a lot of which seems to have been cut and pasted from the guy who shot up Christchurch, New Zealand a couple of years ago, is that he is part of something called the Authoritarian Left. And I think that is the real threat to peace and security of this country is the authoritarian left. The people who, if they don't get their way, it's not win elections and go through the process and get their bill passed like the right does, like we did with abortion. It's, beat up, burn down, shoot, kill, riot, tear up, right? Destroy, right? And that's, and censorship and violation of all our civil rights. I mean, that's not coming from the right. That's coming from the left. That is, and almost all of it. There's very little, of whataboutism you can do here. So just to dispense with that, they're trying to blame something on us that is far, far more accurate to say them than us. The other point on this, though, what the parents of the kids say was really at the bottom of it is that he sat alone in his room getting spun up, reading about all this stuff for 2 years because he was made deathly afraid of COVID, right? He didn't want to go out, didn't want to go to school, sat home reading, getting, indoctrinated, getting inflamed to do these things, right? There's no, if you're out having a daily life, right? First of all, you don't have as many hours on the internet. And secondly, your ideas they're getting other input, right? Whether it's contradictory or complementary, but you're hearing other voices, right? And you're considering those, and you can keep forming and reforming your opinion, right? As people do. Okay. But in this case, this guy's sort of frozen in time. He's doing it all himself. He's not talking to anybody else. And, radical voices got a hold of him. And now he's not to blame. He's the one who actually acted on this. But that's what the parents say was the problem. My understanding of what happened in California, and this is something else. It's, we talk about the authoritarian left. Okay, there are a lot of people out there fighting for the communists within the country, and it appears to be that this was a pro-China terrorist who shot up these people because he perceived them as being leaning toward Taiwan and so forth.
Yeah, these are two interesting cases. I do, in a lot of ways, I wish that, we would look at the kind of the root cause of what's going on here. There always seems to be And I guess that's just the way our life is, the way that we are in this 24/7 world. Is as soon as an event like this occurs, finger pointing, begins immediately without really any reasoning behind it until we can get down bottom of it. And we find some are maybe kooky fringe right and a lot of kooky fringe left, but the tendency is to kind of veer off and blame the conservatives, blame the right wing, kind of people for being behind this, because that helps to create that narrative that we have to have gun control, more gun control. The feds have got to get more involved. All these things have to happen in this country. Yeah, it's tragic. I mean, that's an interesting point on the COVID with this, because we both know, I think, that these extreme lockdowns that we had at the height of COVID had some deleterious effects on our country, and particularly on the young people, not being able to go to school, not seeing their friends, all the isolation that occurred, a lot of a spike in this loneliness / maybe mental illness kind of a thing. Lots of developmental issues occurred because they were not mixing with each other. They were not doing this. And yeah, can you get spun up on the internet if you're stuck at home for hours at a time? Oh yeah.
Adults get spun up myself.
Yeah, right. I mean, all of us. I mean, I don't think that any of us, I mean, if we sit in front of a computer long enough and because with the algorithms of, say, YouTube, if you start watching YouTube or TikTok or whatever, the algorithms once you start watching, they start feeding you more and more stuff. So a guy like this, if he's reading or watching stuff, the algorithms are going to feed him more of the stuff that he's been doing. Right. So it only is perpetuating this problem, right? This is a cycle of stuff that keeps coming at you. What what else is a kid supposed to think, when he's just getting fed all this stuff? Right. So
now, as for gun control, so their immediate salvos have been more of the same ideas, put everybody on a list, prohibit such and such a size magazines and so forth. But New York has all that. It didn't do a thing to stop it, right? In fact, it may well be that Buffalo was chosen for this because of its gun laws, because the shooter knew that other people in the store wouldn't have guns because they're not allowed to. So it's an argument against gun control, and you're never getting that bill off the calendar anyway, right? There's no 60 votes for gun control. There's no way, and it doesn't. Everybody wants to make this like some kind of big NRA's fault or whatever, but it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with NRA. Most of the people who would vote against it if NRA did not exist.
Right. And that's part of the problem too. Is just that a lot of places that these things occur at, there are some very strict gun control laws already in effect. So they didn't stop anything.
They don't do any good. Right.
Right. And so, but they keep repeating the same thing. We got to do all these things. We have this litany of things that we have to do. But it has been tried in a lot of places. It hasn't solved the problem. Another interesting point you're making there too is, which I've heard over and over again, but liberals want to talk about that, is that, you can target areas because gun control makes it hard to own a gun and carry a weapon. Right. You don't have the concealed carry that you do in some other places. So therefore, they become prime targets for someone who wants to do something, because you're going into an area that won't have that, right? I mean, right. So there's all these things to be said for this. Yeah, the thing in California was interesting, because the guy was really ticked off with this whole thing about China and Taiwan and all of this, and went into there. I didn't read enough about this. I don't know. I guess there was a doctor who had died because he ran at the guy and took the majority of the bullets or whatever, and he saved a lot of parishioners over there. So I don't know. Was that a Chinese American or a Chinese congregation? Is that what that was? I think the doctor apparently was Chinese, so he was going after.
They were pro Taiwan.
Yeah. I mean, the doctor who died, I think he had a Chinese surname or an Asian surname. But yeah, I mean, this guy just basically, there's no doubt he flipped his lid on this and all this and taking it to the extreme. And what are you supposed to do in a church? How, gun control? I mean, all of a sudden, once again, going back to other church shootings, it's like you bring increased security, you're going to bring in magnetometers and have parishioners go through all that.
Hey, our parish, they spent a little money, and I guess the diocese gave all the parishes a little money to figure out like what to do at your church if something happens. And so they had consultants. Consultants came and looked at it. You know what they told us? Run, get up and run.
Yeah,
stay in the church and get shot.
I mean, I think there are certain things of maybe a little more restricted access. I mean, the church buildings I normally go into, all the doors are unlocked during the Sunday so people can come in and out. Though I did attend one that was in a less desirable neighborhood, and I noticed that they basically had one set of doors out of like the 3 or 4 sets of doors actually for egress. And that may be a better thing for them, because for us, I mean, once they're in the main meeting, once they're in the sacrament meeting, where everybody gathers, there is no security otherwise, right? I mean, right. So some people could walk, and if you're in kind of a sketchy neighborhood, yeah, who knows? I mean, it's otherwise people go in there and steal stuff. Who knows what the heck? So, run. Yeah, I mean, duck and cover. Just protect yourself the best way you can.
Yeah, down the hill.
I mean, so none of these laws, none of these gun laws will stop this from happening. It's unfortunate, but this is something. This is one of those things that is part of our lives, like it or not, that is just out there, and all this.
Yeah. And the thing about it is like what you said, though, there's this blame game that goes on around these things. He's right wing, he's left wing. It's all Tucker Carlson's fault. It's all somebody else's fault. This all starts with somebody who is not right mentally, right?
Right.
And so loneliness, isolation. I don't know. You get to the point where what of those is cause and what is effect, right? But the crux, the thing at the bottom of all this is mental illness, is people not being allowed to like crawl inside these holes, right, of mental illness and just stay in there and freak out and get worse and worse and worse. And, that's what's going on here. And that's the thing that if you want to do something about mass shootings, let's figure that out. And that's one of those things that sort of roll back, because, the left sort of pushed us, deinstitutionalization and so forth. That's what happened. Now, Charlton is talking about his Reformed Jewish temple in Shreveport, which is a nice neighborhood, beautiful place they have there. And, if they're adding security, then, that tells you that they're worried about some stuff. And that's not a place where there's just people going to wandering off the street. You got to be going there to get there. So you're starting to see that in churches, especially, and I know that like there's a Reformed Jewish temple in McLean. It's right by where I have some of my basketball stuff. And you go by there and there's always armed, marked police anytime they have anything. 2 armed, marked Fairfax County police cruisers sitting in front of that church to, serve notice. Anybody who comes up you're going to be dealing with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think just the visibility is a deterrent. I mean, they don't even have to be on duty people. I mean, you could have a member of your congregation who may be in law enforcement and has privileges to take the cruiser home and everything like this. Mm-hmm. Why not? If you have that, I think it would be great to encourage them to, when they come to church, come to church in the cruiser.
Bring it on up there, right?
Just park the cruiser. You go inside for church services, but park the cruiser. I mean, that in and of itself will be a large deterrent if a criminal, if one of these people who wants to do this thinks that there's going to be, law enforcement inside for whatever reason, they're going to change their mind. But your point is well made too. I mean, if you study and look at the majority of these incidences that we've had, over the last 5-10 years, whatever period of time you want to look at, who have they been? They have been loners for the most part. And, if you're writing a manifesto, you're not exactly going to be the family man with 5 kids. Okay.
Right. Like me and you do not have manifestos because we don't have time to stop and think about like all the stuff we really hate and want to kill. Right. I mean, we just got other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Kind of moving quickly here. But what that does, though, if you think about it, it keeps us from landing on things that we deeply hate and want to kill. Right. I mean, we kind of got to move on. We can't, dump a bunch of hate into this or that thing because we're getting all this input. We have all these people in our lives talking to us and loving us, which is a big factor in this. I guess the guy in Buffalo, he had parents there and they were trying to do the best they could, but they knew that he was troubled and they were trying to stay on top of it. And he was, a lot of what he says in his manifesto is he's talking about how he deceived them and all the stuff he hid from them and lied to them about and so forth. So I mean, that's part of this is like you got to stay on top of your kids, and even that might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a time I think when parents were more aware of what their children were doing. I think over the last few decades,
you can't really, like when we were kids, you could not really carry on conversations with people around the world. I mean, you're writing letters, you're waiting a few days for them to get it, and then a few more days for them to write back, and then it to travel back over here, and so there was not a lot of, you just kind of couldn't do that, right? So, but now, I mean, you can FaceTime. I mean, we're what, about 40 miles apart, 30 miles apart, and but we could be 4,000 miles apart and be doing exactly what we're doing.
Exactly, right.
Yeah. So, that changes, how all this does. So, when you think about all the things that, yay technology, and I don't want to censor anything, but, child pornography, child having sex with kids, however you want to pedos, whatever. Okay. 20, 30 years ago, it was very low key because, you couldn't trust, if you're a pedo, you can't really have that conversation with anybody. You can't really go up to somebody, hey, are you a pedo? Get away from me. Disgusting. You sort of have to you catch them being interested in it and they catch you being interested in it. Right now, there are forums on the internet. There's people on there talking about it. There's college, this college professor at Old Dominion, because, wanted to change the name of it because pedophilia had such a negative vibe associated. Yes, it does. It's very negative vibe. We hate the crap out of pedophilia, right? Leave my kids alone. So, you're dealing with a whole different, set of, it's more accessible. Other craziness is more acceptable. There's a lot of, this kid was being served a lot of hatred, right? Of, Black people, Jews, security, he had a lot of hatred within him when he went to that grocery store. And the guy in California too, right? And there's they firebombed a place in Wisconsin that helps women who choose not to have an abortion. So they're not out stopping abortions. They are, if someone says, okay, I'm going to have this baby, they're the ones who give you a place to stay and clothes and some money and take care of you and keep you going, right? That's what they firebomb. So it's like the hate is passionate and it's indiscriminate, and it's coming at you, right? And you got to deal with it. You got to let these people. It's got to be able to get out and get dispersed, right? Because now it's a pressure cooker.
That's right. All right, we'll move on here to what's going on in Ukraine, and mainly really to talk about just briefly with Finland and Sweden, applying to join NATO. Putin has made some remarks about that, and Turkey is threatening trying to hold that up. I mean, what are your thoughts here?
Well, of course, Putin's going to, Putin has an 830-mile border with Finland, and he's managed to convince Finland that it did not need the West before now to protect it. But now, Finland feels threatened enough to think about this. This is, you're bordering a country that's, a world military power, and you're aligning with its enemies. Okay. You must be pretty darn concerned about some stuff, right? That's not a natural thing people would do. Right. So, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has objected based on the fact that they, the Finns accept some like Kurds who are escaping from Turkey. They let them go up there and live and so forth. And he's got some little things that he wants concessions on. And it's widely believed that he's making a lot of noise, but that if he could be, a deal could be struck. So he's in the way now. It's not clear that he will stay in the way. It's not clear that this is what the response will be out of Russia, because then if Finland is an Article 5 country, that changes a lot of his calculations. Then he can't really move, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting set of stuff. My guess is that both Finland and Sweden end up in NATO. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not 3 months from now, but by the end of the year, by this time next year, yeah, I think so. I guess the applications went in today.
Yeah,
so they have officially applied.
Yeah, I mean, this is all due to Putin's aggression here.
Yeah,
I mean, Finland was fine. I mean, they've been living with this whole thing for a long time.
Aligned for the whole of the post World War II era. They had sat in this pretty precarious spot and managed to not join either faction. But now they feel they need the faction that's sort of farthest away from them to protect it from the one on their border. So that kind of tells you that the threat level, Europe is taking the threat of Putin seriously.
Yeah, it's amazing. They didn't seem to quite be convinced by Putin that there was a threat of invasion in Russia, so that's why he had to invade Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't. He's not really telling a good story here, so it's sort of hard to believe him and take your teeth into it or whatever. So
it looks like Mariupol is going to fall now. They've been evacuating.
Right. It looks like it looks like they've taken control of that. So
yeah.
I guess they're taking some of the soldiers that were there back to Russia for questioning. So Mariupol is that's a key thing because you're pretty close to building your bridge to the warm water port at that point.
Yeah, there was a really interesting story about the Ukrainians. I mean, I continue to they just continue to amaze me in terms of their resilience and their willingness to stand up. But there was a story about these 3 brothers, and they were all shot, and then they were dumped in a grave. But one of the brothers, the bullet, apparently he had like a hood over his head or whatever. And apparently whoever the soldier who shot him didn't actually, didn't kill him. I mean, didn't aim it right or whatever. And so it kind of grazed through his ear or whatever. And I mean, they threw him in, and part of the story is this, that, to his brothers, he could hear one of his brothers, he knew one of them was dead, and the other one, he could hear him, his last breath. But he's like, wait a minute, I'm alive. But then there was dirt being piled on him, right? And then I guess the Russians left, and then he managed to get himself out of that grave as fast as he could, and then make his way back to his village. And that was a torturous journey. I mean, this to try to get back there, because he had to try to figure out where the heck he was. And then, and he got some food and some sustenance from some other people helping him along the way. There was even a point in the story where he had spoken to somebody who had, and he was trying to figure out which way the Russian soldiers went, and the guy said this way, but he thought this guy was a little sketchy, so he went the other way.
Look at that. Yeah.
And he wound up in his village eventually, and everything like that. I mean, and he told his parents, and it took him quite a while to try to figure out where he had been, so that they could go back and retrieve the bodies of his brothers. But they managed to do that eventually, and everything like this. But it only seems to just continue to harden the resolve of the Ukrainians when they see and they read these stories, and any of the pushback that they get. I think they have a Russian soldier that's on trial for war crimes or something like that.
Right, and there's going to be a lot more. There's a lot of people over there gathering evidence for war crimes trials, including some State Department people. that are going through the country, and people from other countries, diplomatic corps going through and collecting evidence of crimes. The other thing is, I'm not sure even with the Mariupol falling, I don't think you can look at the Russians being in real good shape here. I mean, they've lost a lot of equipment. They had a thing the other day where they threw down pontoon bridges to cross a battalion across a river, and the Ukrainians showed up and blew up the pontoon bridges, so they're trapped against a river, and then just that they killed a bunch of people and destroyed a bunch of equipment. Right, this is starting to run into some serious loss. The Russians have near 30,000 troops killed in this war. The Russians are at this point. So, and a lot of equipment, a lot of airplanes, some battleships. They're taking on some heavy losses. We're also finding that like they had upgrades for their equipment that they never applied, like their Su-25s, which is one of their older fighter planes. It's not a fighter. I'm sorry. It's like a bomber. It's like sort of analogous to B-52s. They had targeting software, but they didn't put it on the plane, so they don't really know what they're bombing, right? So, I mean, who does that, right? If you have the stuff, but what has happened is, the corruption and rot of the Russian government and how it buys things and provides for its troops and so forth is being exposed here, because a lot of times someone pocketed that money. There was 50 planes and they bought enough for 50 planes, and they put it on 10 planes and pocketed the rest of the money, right? You keep doing that, you don't have a military, right? You're not ready for this. So, the Canadians have strung them out, and they're making them use resources that were not ready for prime time. So, that's the other thing that's slowing down this advance. And there's, you have these people in the West, well, it's also a good time for Zelensky to take a deal, right? And there may not need to be a deal. Ukraine might win.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a possibility, and it's once again just shows that Putin did not plan. They did not plan this very well. I mean, the losses of soldiers and the material and everything like this just shows how badly planned this has been. Yeah, and the corruption. You on paper, they thought maybe Putin thought they had all this stuff because they spent the money on it. But as you have just mentioned, the corruption has, they basically have pocketed the money, and therefore they've actually left their military with the lack of things that they needed to do. They're just, it's a real lesson on how not to conduct a war, if anything else.
Yeah. And the other thing is, make no mistake, we don't have this problem to this degree, but we do have this problem. We have corruption, and we have rot in our military. We have training objectives that don't square with improving reality, which ought to be our only goals. And we have some of these problems ourselves.
Yeah, everything has become so big and so bureaucratic that it will foster corruption. I mean,
right.
We're not lean, mean fighting machine in that sense, and we have all these layers, and we spend a lot of money with a lot of things just being tacked on.
Yeah, reason all those problems. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So as a result of that, we wind up with that. I mean, I talk, my wife and I talk a lot about just, when we look at Africa, we know a lot of people who've come from Africa and things like this. And, what if you really sit down with an African, talk about it, what would they say is one of the major problems in their home country? It's corruption. Yeah. And it really doesn't make a difference what country they're coming from. They will talk about corruption because it is so rampant and widespread there.
Yeah, if you think, like that, Heritage Foundation does that index of economic freedom, and, rule of law, corruption is emerging as the number one indicator of whether you can be a prosperous country.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. There's been a little primary news from yesterday, so let's talk about that.
A little bit.
Pennsylvania being front and center because we've got Dr. Oz and this McCormick guy. They are neck and neck. I mean, I don't know, they're just a few thousand votes apart. The last stories I've seen saying that it'll could be days before they get the unofficial count because they have mail-in balloting there, right? So
yeah, and they're Pennsylvania, and they
so
need to see how many they need before they drop them all in the box.
But I think Kathy Barnett, she had a pretty good showing, and if she affected anybody, she probably affected the Oz vote more than the McCormick vote, I would think, on this.
That's hard for me to read. She took a lot of, I guess she was taking the Candace Owens type fans, right? Which is it's a sector, but it's not a huge sector. She ended up with in the 20 somewhere,
24%. Considering that Oz and McCormick are at like 31-ish apiece, she was definitely a force to be reckoned with. But yeah, I'm glad you said Candace Owens because that's exactly what I thought when I saw her.
Yeah, it's sort of the angry woman, our side view.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Barnett fits completely in that book. Her story is certainly inspiring. Trump said that there was stuff about her that if we knew it, she would be unelectable. And that if Oz messes up, you can blame it on him. So I think he's got Oz's undivided attention on what needs to be done if he were to get into the Senate. So I don't worry so much about him as other conservatives do.
Yeah. So do you think Oz prevails though when the final votes are counted?
It looks like he's ahead enough now that he would. Yeah. I could be wrong, and it's Pennsylvania, and there's the motivation there that since he's the Trump guy to try to screw him, right? Because that's the way they are there. And the Trump guy won the gubernatorial nomination, Mastriano. From what I understand, I haven't been in Pennsylvania in a few months, but what I understand is the intensity for him is Trumpian level, right? The Mastriano's Republicans are coming out of the woodwork to support him. He's the guy who called the hearing in Gettysburg, if you recall, right after the election, where they were going through the thing where they said, something like 70,000 of those mail-in votes, they came back before they were mailed out, right? Their return date preceded their received date, which means they never went out, right? They were stamped in the office by someone. So, he's the guy who came up with that, revealed all that. And that was the one point in this thing where I thought there was enough momentum about looking at election results to where we might actually get some traction on it. He was the best one at eliciting the responses. So, he's a MAGA hero, and I said that he will win the election rather easily. The Democrat nominee, I believe, is going to be this Fetterman guy who had a stroke and is still in the hospital and once chased black people down the street with a shotgun.
Well, Fetterman is the Senate candidate.
Huh? Fetterman, I'm sorry, that's right. He's Senate. That's right.
Yeah, Josh Shapiro is
who said, he's the only. Hey, I'm the only pro-life guy in the race. Pro-choice guy in the race. Good for you. Be the only pro-abortion guy in the race.
Yeah, I don't see that as a winning message. But what I heard what I thought was interesting is that his campaign decided that Mastriano was going to be the guy that they wanted to face versus instead of Barletta, so that they even put out campaign ads to try to actually boost Mastriano because they wanted him as the opponent. I mean, Mastriano, I think there's pluses and minuses. I mean, in terms of having MAGA support, I think that definitely brings out a lot of people. If you're looking for crossover votes in Pennsylvania, though, that will also can be a potential negative. I mean, the whole vote thing, could be. I have no doubt that Shapiro is going to, portray this as kind of this, the big lie, the January 16th. They're going to throw all that stuff at him. I don't know how much of that will stick, but we'll have to wait and see. The Fetterman thing, when you brought, I meant to mention him only because, I hadn't paid any attention to this guy at all. And then I saw a picture of him the other day because he came up in the news because of the stroke he had. And I thought, holy cow. He's like, this guy looks like he belongs on a Harley Davidson or something like that. He's 6'9".
Yeah.
He's huge.
Big dude.
But he definitely represents the progressive left. I mean, that was one of the things that, that the progressives did not win all the races, in the primaries last night that, they'd hoped to win, but they made some pretty good showings. And if a guy like Fetterman wins, once again, that's another turn, much harder turn to the left, then, I mean, he'd be teamed up with Casey. I mean, Casey's not a, he's not a progressive lefty guy,
Right.
and stuff like that. So, Fetterman would stick out like that, but there are allies in Congress with people like that, but that should be enough to say, you got to stay away from that. Vote for Oz or McCormick, whoever winds up being the Republican nominee, because you don't want the Fetterman guy in there. I mean, in general. Right. So, that's not a good thing. I mean, I think the progressives, they won the race for that. They beat the incumbent in the Democrat primary in Congress. The guy's name was Schrader. I think he lost. I think he lost big time to the lefty out there. But Trump had, I mean, and he didn't, the gubernatorial race in Idaho, the lieutenant, she fell far behind Brad Little, and I didn't think that she was really going to get that far. But North Carolina, Ted Budd, right? Yep. He comes out on top. And I'm not.
Connor Lamb also lost, moderate Democrat to a hardcore leftist.
Yeah, I mean Lamb. I mean, and I don't.
What the Democrats are telling you is that they don't think they get the energy from the middle of the party. They think the energy comes from the far left extreme, and that's what they're highlighting now. That's where they're going with their momentum, with their efforts, what they're doing. So. I don't think that's really bad for us, because I think those people are not electable.
Yeah,
and that's what the country is fed up with, is woke anger, authoritarian left. I think that's what they've had enough of.
Yeah, and I think in especially when you look at House districts after all the redistricting, where some of these Democrat districts have been shaved by a few points, if not completely, turned upside down in some cases. You take a centrist Democrat and you take him out and you put in a wokey lefty person, the Republicans actually might stand a chance, because the contrast will be so much greater that you begin to wonder. I mean, even in Oregon, I mean, you begin to wonder. I mean, yeah, so they are kind of their own thing out there, but there are limits to some of this as to how far you want to go with this.
Right, and the pedos in schools and all this kind of stuff, and the CRT. The middle, the truly middle people, which is not all that big a group anymore, right? Used to be, and people say they're independent. It does not mean that they are ideologically in the middle of Democrats and Republicans. It just means they're not a member of a party, right? A lot of them are very strongly right or left, right? They just don't believe in the party. But the people who are truly in the middle are looking at Democrats right now, and they're saying, you've gone way too far with the crazy, and we're going to vote the other way. I mean, that's why the generic ballots and all the indicators are pointing toward a landslide for Republicans. And the economy, right? The economic situation is such that it is. If Biden does not make major progress on lowering the price of gas, reducing the rate of inflation in the next 3 weeks or so, I mean, you could be looking at historic losses, because once you get past the 1st of June, right, we're baked in. Even if the economy improved between now and November, people would still be looking at it as a bad economy.
Yeah, and as I've said before, I mean, the thing is that that we've got. So you mentioned, I'm the only pro-choice candidate out there. Fine, but that's not going to be the number one issue for voters.
Anybody who's going to, no pro-life person's going to say, oh, well, he's the only one, and, the pro-choice people are probably going to vote for you anyway. So, the whole abortion thing, they get all mad, their summer of rage and all this stuff. I don't think that's helpful to the Democrats. I think it makes them look unstable and angry and not serious. You're not going to change any votes, right? The people who are pro-life are going to stay pro-life.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about inflation and things like this, I mean, we've been waiting for this shoe to drop, and it dropped yesterday and it dropped today, I think, in a lot of cases. So yesterday, Walmart came out with their earnings, and they were below expectations. And the reason, had been is that people were still spending some money. I mean, retail sales are up like 0.9% the other day, which was stronger than expected. But Walmart and then today with Target, they both showed that part of the problem with this is that people may still be spending because they have to spend, but the dollars are there
because the price of everything
the prices are up. But the problem now is that the cost pressure on both Walmart and Target were huge. They've been doing things. I mean, they've been facing large, increases in transportation costs. They've been doing what they can for labor costs because they still need people, and so they're now paying up more than they were before with labor, and it's coming home to roost finally. Target was the worst because Target, I mean, this morning Target stock, I mean, yesterday Walmart stock was off like 10%, which was like the biggest drop they've had, in I don't know how many years. But Target stock dropped 25% at the open this morning. That's pretty big. I mean, that's a big number.
Yeah.
And they lowered expectations for the future. So, Joe Biden, trying to say that, we're doing all these wonderful things. No, it's not. You're not doing wonderful things. And these two earnings reports from two leading retailers.
What's bigger than that is Jeff Bezos, of all people, right? Leftist owner of the Washington Post, right? He started tweaking Biden about the inflation, and he's like, he retweeted someone else saying, Biden takes credit for deficit reduction. Oh, largest deficit reduction. That's because all the COVID funding bills have run out, right? So we're not dumping zillions of dollars into buying vaxes and setting up vax clinics and testing, contact tracing, and all that nonsense that we were doing, right? We're past that stage. So yeah, we're not spending that. So it's not as bad as it was. But, there's nothing Biden has done is remotely responsible for the fact that the deficit, it would be $3.1 trillion higher if not for Joe Manchin and Sinema blocking his Build Back Better, right? And so, for him to turn around and take credit for deficit reduction is ridiculous, right? His main contribution to deficit reduction is being unable to get, the Senate, which his party controls, to cooperate with his legislative program.
Right. And I mean, and the left, I always love it because, you got a guy like Bezos who's, not a conservative by any stretch of imagination. No. And then he's, now he's attacking, Biden, pointing out, he gets conservatives on board with him because, you have to agree that basically what Bezos said is correct, right? I mean, yeah. He was calling him out, which people should be calling out Biden because this is an outright lie to talk about this deficit reduction. That there's been some great thing that the administration has done when it is all about the spending issue, that we don't have the pandemic spending and we don't have the BBB spending in there. Otherwise, it'll be a whole different ball game. So he's lied to the American public, with that. And you get Bezos
out there about the price of energy. He blames it on the oil companies. He blames the groceries on, food people harpooning us. It's never anything structural. It's never anything that he did or that he could fix, right? It's all, they want to go after the profits of the oil companies. When you're doing this to them, you got to be nuts, right? You canceled all these leases, canceled more leases last week in Alaska, right? They're not, you're not letting them produce energy, and the world needs it. We could, the whole Ukraine equation would be changed if the Biden had not stopped Keystone and had not stopped, LNG ports from going forward, right? We could be exporting LNG, liquefied natural gas, to Europe and just take the Russians' business, just take it right away. Trump would do that, right? Say, sure, we'll now be Europe's liquefied natural gas. We keep energy prices low and our energy sector booming for decades, right? But Trump is, and of course, Biden is like, well, we don't really want fossil fuel energy anyway, right? So, that's the level of stupidity you're dealing with, and it's not going to change. It's not going to get better, and we're now, I think we're on the 9th straight day today of record high gas prices, right? It keeps going up. It keeps getting worse. And, they not only are not doing anything to fix it and don't seem to have any, they don't really want it fixed. They're fine with it, choking the economy and taking everybody's money.
Yeah, I mean, J.P. Morgan, I think this morning said that the $6, gallon gas that's now in California could hit nationwide by the end of the summer. That's a frightening thought. I mean, I've been posting on Facebook just every few days as I watch my local stations around here, which I've always considered to be a little bit on the high end to begin with, but how fast the prices
slightly higher in Montgomery County, baby.
Yeah, and how fast
they used to have the liquor ads in the Washington Post, right? It'd say, here's our prices for liquor, and there was a little thing in there, prices slightly higher in Montgomery County.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a station, which is the Exxon station, which has always been the highest of the 4 or 5 stations that we have, near me. And they just went up a nickel the other day to $4.89, so they are very close to that $5 mark. Here, and it's
Reston gets hammered too. We're a planned community. If you can live in a planned community, you can afford anything, right? Well, we're affording it.
I think that same thing happens in Columbia, Maryland, because my wife shops over there, and I thought the prices in Columbia were rather high, with the exception of Costco. Which at least if you have a Costco or a Sam's Club membership, chances are you'll spend a little bit less, with that. But you don't have one in every neighborhood, so it's only certain places that really benefit by that to begin with. But a couple things here too is that one, I mean, with that oil and gas lease, it's not like if they allow them to go forward that all of a sudden the problem would be solved immediately anyway. It takes time to go through that process. So this is a process that could, it's a 6-month to 12-month process before anything happens on that land anyway in general. So you're now affecting future supply. I mean, by killing all these things off, and then you're throwing all the oil and gas explorers, your companies are saying like, they're trying to figure out exactly where they're going and what they're going to be doing as they try to plan their capital expenditures. And, they have to kind of shift this thing. They really, if they don't things that they used to be able to count on from the government, they can't count on them anymore. And then they got to shift. The other thing that gets me is just, and I will harp on this for a long time, I think, which is the diesel prices, because that is part of the heart of the economy. I mean, how do we get goods from place A to place B on trucks? We need diesel fuel.
Two things. Like, you realize that diesel fuel and home heating oil are basically the same thing. So when you short one of those, you short them both, right? So that's a double whammy. That's as regressive a tax as you can impose, right? As the poor have to pay for it, stuff is just as far away for them as it is for the rich, and they have to heat and cool their houses too.
Right?
Yeah, but you can't get away from those expenses.
Yeah, and my concern here though is just that so we've got the Shell station, which seems to be the magnet for all the local businesses with their fleets. I mean, if I drive by there at between 6 and 7 in the morning, that place is loaded with the landscaping trucks, and we have, I live in an area where we've got lots of businesses, the HVAC people, all kinds of things, and they're all driving these diesel vehicles. And so it seems like everybody goes there to gas up. They must have, maybe they're the fleet deal and whatever, so they can just do that. But, when they're paying $6 a gallon for that, which is going to go higher, the gap now, I don't recall ever seeing the gap between regular gas and diesel being this high. Yeah. And I think it's expanding. And I just like, if you're running a business that has delivery trucks and things like this, you're getting killed. I mean, you cannot raise
diesel,
your price.
That's because the diesel is caught in the home heating oil squeeze.
Right. Yeah. And you can't raise your prices fast enough to do this. And normally, when we've had this relative period of low inflation, the corporations, while they make money, they like a little bit of moderate inflation because it gives them a little pricing power. But the problem now is that inflation is so high, even though they can raise their prices, their costs are going up at a rapid pace. So, smaller businesses are being squeezed to heck, and it's causing a lot of problems here. And, Joe Biden, the working man guy, right, blue collar Joe, he doesn't understand any of this. He is so clueless.
Cannot. They have nothing in the way of a solution to any of that.
Right. All right. Well, we've run up against the hour, so let's do 2 minutes.
Elon Musk, dun, 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 he has said that he's not going to pay all this money for Twitter unless Twitter can prove that fewer than 5% of its accounts are bots. And Twitter, of course, cannot do that. As supposedly half of Biden's supporters or followers on Twitter are bots. So it's a long time thing of them is to just add these accounts and people with one follower and stuff, so that they can show support for things that aren't really supported, right? And so the CEO of Twitter now puts out this long thread about he wants us to prove this, and we know it to be true, but there's all this proprietary information involved. We can't just be sharing that stuff around. And he knows that it's kind of irresponsible for him to, put us on the spot like this. And the Musk responded with the BS emoji. So, he's not taking this seriously. And the thing about it is like either the CEO produces the proof, right? Or he admits he can't produce the proof, which means they lied on their SEC filings, like what should be the value of the company when they said it was less than 5%, right? If it's not, then so he's criminally liable for lying on the SEC thing, or he can say, okay, you're right, and so the company's not really worth all that much, so we'll sell it to you, but it's going to be for a lot less, right? And now the leftists this morning were celebrating the fact that they may be able to force Elon Musk to buy Twitter, right? Oh, he wants out of it. We can make him take it. Okay, yeah, please. I beg of you, make him take it.
Yeah, the Musk is just I consider him one of the most mercurial people in the world because he's so hard to pin down. So he did all these things. He probably violated SEC regulations when he acquired the Twitter stock and didn't report it on time when he had hit the 5% threshold.
Yeah, that's a minor fact. Yeah.
The Twitter, the whole fake account thing, kind of thing like this. I mean. We know social media is riddled with this because there is really no effective way to police it totally. We've also seen over the years that Twitter has tried to periodically go through and clean those out and and delete them. I mean, we'd see people whose counts their follower counts would drop down significantly because of that. Right. Now what apparently Musk is doing is that he's using this other outfit that has a very broad definition of what a bot account is, which is also including apparently some automated accounts that feed out news and stuff like that, and probably are not really traditional bot accounts. I mean, their purpose is just to kind of
not what we think of when we think of a bot.
Yeah. So what Musk is really trying to accomplish here is he trying to drive down the price. Does that really benefit him? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I mean, he'd have to drive down the price enough to where at least it's maybe, somewhere where he can still make money off what he had already purchased. There is $1 billion breakup fee if he walks away from this, or if the Twitter board at least could get him to pony up $1 billion no matter what, which they could probably use. I was always skeptical that he would actually complete this deal because I just couldn't see where Musk was going to benefit by doing this. This is not a business that fits into the kinds of things that he does, but he definitely has shaken things up, in the meantime.
Yeah, I think he will. The other thing is, one before we go, the Pga Golf Tournament starts tomorrow in Tulsa. The last year's winner was Phil Mickelson. He was 50 years old, the oldest person ever to win a major golf tournament. Won't be there this year because of his involvement with this Saudi tour that's like just trying to buy people off the PGA tour. And he is, he's sort of sided with them, and he sort of lost his place in the golf, pantheon right now. And it's unclear if he will get it back. So a weird thing there with Phil Mickelson. He's always had a great reputation. He really has killed his brand in the last couple of years.
Yeah, he didn't help himself with that in the statements he made with regard to that at all. All right, so we've wrapped it up. We have great show. Thanks everyone for joining us. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America, and we will see you again next week.